our next guest is going to talk to us about what she likes to call compassionate conversations to grow and strengthen the movement that we're creating. So we're excited to bring on Rev Wendy Silvers, who for the past 21 years and counting has helped moms embody their power, raise empowered kids, and change the world through vision and grace. She is a mom, coach, licensed minister, spiritual therapist, author, speaker, teacher, and sacred activist. She is the founder of the Millions Mamas movement, creator of the Awakened Mother series, host of the Awakened Mother podcast, and co-author of the international best-selling book, Balance for Busy Moms. Her book will be published in spring of 2022. Rev Wendy has decades of experience as a spiritual counselor, trauma-informed parenting coach, child development, 35 years of experience in 12-step recovery movement, and had a former career as an entertainment publicist. She is married and the proud mother of an amazing young woman. We're so excited to bring you on, Wendy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for what you do and for this show. And I'm just so honored to be here with these illustrious guests. It's just what CHD is doing is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. And when I met you at Defeat the Mandates LA, there was like an instant connection between the two of us, like two kindred spirits that somehow found each other. And the conversations that we've had since, I mean, yeah. It's just amazing to be amongst like-minded people. So thank you so much for being here. Talk to me about these compassionate conversations and the power of what this can create to bridge the gap between people that may be coming from two opposite ends of the spectrum on issues that are really polarizing right now.
Very well. My experience has been that when we are able to move into our hearts and we're able to open up our ears and not be so committed to getting somebody to understand what we're saying, there's a connection that's created. Now, I know from having been in this movement for so many years that it can be really tricky when you are, I talk a lot about, and I won't go into it in a very deep way, but I talk a lot about the brain science. I talk a lot about when your brain gets triggered, when your amygdala, the alarm goes off and what I call like you flip your lid and the reasoning part of the brain isn't available. That is when a lot of people get very flooded and they get really activated, and it's really hard to have a conversation. So suffering cannot be healed by self-hatred, and it cannot be healed by people fighting with each other. The way that we reach each other is to step back, to pause, to breathe, to center ourselves and our hearts so that we can go forward and have effective communication. It may not change that person's mind, but it allows us, Dr. Corey talked about something earlier that I think is really important. Talk about having agency. When we are flooded, when we are not in our right minds, we don't have agency. And it becomes a whole, you've heard the phrase fight or flight. Well, there's also freeze. There's also people please. So when your brain isn't regulated, when you are what is called dysregulated, the ability to access agency, the ability to center down and be able to communicate effectively goes out the window. We've seen it at hearings. We've seen it with people that are deliberately like poking the bear, waiting for somebody to erupt. So my work has been for years moving into the heart and moving into that place and that space where we have access to the higher reasoning, where we're able to have connected communications, where we meet at a place that we care about. For instance, we all love our children, even the people that are making choices that we completely disagree with. A lot of them are making choices from a place of love. So it is through love that we can connect. It is through love that we are able to have a conversation. And when I talk about compassion, I talk about the ability to be with your own suffering, your own discomfort, and to be present to somebody else's. And that is a practice. And it is called practice because one has to return again and again and again to activating that compassion. connection is something that we as a species thrive on. And that is why when we were under forced house arrest or the lockdowns, it was so damaging to the emotional, mental well-being of so many people. And so what's important to remember is that the way that we connect is through our conversations. It's through our ability to have empathy. It's through our ability to have deep listening to what is being communicated. So what does that look like? I can remember many years ago being with an elected official that was one of the co-writers of SB 277. And I was at an event, and people were taking pictures. And I said, shall we get a picture? And she said to me, well, why do you want my picture? And I said, well, if we cannot cross the aisles, we are not going to accomplish anything. And she turned around and she said, you're absolutely right. So the point of that is, do I agree with this elected official? Not even a little. But to have some sort of connection, to open up a dialogue, to move into a place where I can speak and be heard, and I can hear them even when everything in my body does not agree with them. In order to help our children move through these times, especially with the resurgence of the mask mandates in California, it requires us as parents to anchor a place of, I don't know if the word that is actually neutrality, because we all feel so strongly about what's happening, but to be able to have some level of agency and composure in supporting our children to activate their own sense of well-being as they navigate these times is imperative. And the way that we do that is through listening to them, not using everything as a teachable moment, not having our agendas lead us, but by really listening, acknowledging, connecting, and supporting them in reaching within themselves. How do you feel about this? What would you like to do? How would you like to respond to that? When we are able to have agency, which is our birthright as human beings, agency, sovereignty over our being, then we can navigate situations that are really challenging. But we as parents, we as teachers, we as the ones who are with the children, we have to create this container, and it begins with us. Our children are constantly watching us. They listen to everything we say. They watch what we do. They watch how we interact with people. So it is highly important to really learn the art of compassionate, connected communication. It begins with, where am I at? What am I committed to creating in this situation? Who am I committed to being? The doing comes after the being. So when we talk about compassion, these are unprecedented times. These are times where we are just searching to find meaning in places that seem and very much appear to be insanity. How can we find that place within us to be committed to being a certain way? Everything is energy. Everything is vibration. So what we transmit is what we're going to create and what we're going to receive. But that doesn't preclude finding what is mine to do, what is yours to do, as we see with all the guests that are on that. But that is a thumbnail of the ways in which we can first learn the art of compassion and connected communication.
I think it's so true because, what I find is oftentimes when people have this conversation, I did the landmark curriculum for living, and there's this there's this way that we listen to people. There's an already always listening. So it's
Yes.
like when you have conversations with certain people in your family that maybe on one side they're very much on the side of all these COVID mitigation protocols, they're lining up for their shots and their boosters. Oftentimes we lead into this conversation with an already always listening of how we think that conversation is going to go. And oftentimes what you manifest in your mind is going to happen often happens. And it's the way that you speak, the tone of voice that you use, the fact that many people, when they're having this conversation, they are not listening to the person and I'm guilty of doing it myself. I'm sure
Oh,
that
yeah.
we've all had those moments where you're so impassioned about the topic you're talking about that you just want to give them all the information and shake them until they see it. But when you're not actively listening, because
Hmm.
people will tell you when they're talking where there's an area to have a conversation. But if you're busy formulating what your next sentence is going to be, and you're not actively listening to that person, you're not going to hear the cue or pick up on that little inclination of their voice that's going to allow you to maybe say something that's going to really have that impact, even if you don't know it has it. And I think that that immediate gratification for a lot
Hmm.
of people is where we get tripped up, because we live in this immediate gratification society. So can you talk a little bit about the value of planting those seeds gently and continuing to have these compassionate conversations and watching things bloom?
Yes. Yes, thank you for that. I love Landmark, and I've been through a really transformational, transformation is just so glorious and confronting at the same time.
Yeah.
But one of the ways to do that is by open questions like, did you know? And I hear you. And genuinely, not formulating your response to somebody while they're standing there, but really taking it in, pausing, that ability to really hear somebody and say to them, like I know somebody in my family that was very concerned during the pandemic and went as far as to say to me, well, when I see you, I'm not going to hug you. I'm not going to talk to you. And I just, they're one of my favorite relatives. And I just went, okay, okay, I hear you. And then they went on to say, well, you need to read, you need to listen to the scientists and the doctors and the people. And I went, I am doing that. And I'm happy to share information with you. So there was a different, and then when I saw them, they gave me a huge hug. And so it's there's a saying, living with an undefended heart. The hardest part to walk into a situation where I feel like I'm going to be attacked or I have to defend myself is a defensiveness. There's a defensiveness and an offensiveness. Like I'm going to go in there. I stood in front of a superintendent of the local schools in the town that I lived, and I asked him about my concern. I said, "Are you aware of the bullying that is happening between parents and parents?" And he, it took him back for a second because everybody's, oh, this anti-bullying and zero tolerance for bullying, and yet there has been this epidemic of bullying and power over, which is also something that I talk about. Because if you want to eliminate the power differential between people, it emerges from really listening and seeking what is the unmet need. And that's a much deeper exploration. But to really stand in front of somebody and to hear what's going on. And what we have been really contending with more than anything is false evidence appearing real, which is fear. And fear just takes over, it takes over the survival part of the brain. And that's why so many people have been able to be controlled, because when they're pumping out, consciously listening and unconsciously receiving this message of your life is at risk, your life is at risk. So it takes an enormous courage and commitment to step away from the commentary, to turn off the TV, to stop scrolling, CNN and MSNBC and the mainstream, and go, okay, wait, I'm gonna do a little research myself and check into my intuition. We've all been given this inner guidance system called our intuition. And the only way we can activate our intuition is by stepping back, turning off the media, and turning within. And that is something I'm a huge proponent of, because we can't listen if we're activated. If our alarm center is going off, we're just trying to put out the fire. So we have the opportunity to still do what's ours to do, but to do it from a place where we're centered and grounded, and to lean into others like us who can hold that container and say, I know it's crazy pants out there. You're not crazy. You're not alone. I'm here for you. You're here for, we're here for you. We got you. And we're going to get through this. I really believe that love has the final word. We've heard that. I've heard that, before, and it's really true. But to get to that place of love, I'm not talking about a sentimental greeting card love. I'm talking about a love that has space for both and the ability to tap into my inner guidance system and help everyone else to do that. So what is theirs to do, they do from a very effective place.
I love that. The inner guidance system, that's something that we need to coin and teach to our children, because the truth is, they are being taught to comply. They're being taught not to trust their own voice, but to trust the voices of others. And I think as parents, it's our job to set that example for our children, to show them what it means to be brave, to stand up, to rise up, to say when something is not right, and to stand for it, no matter what that means. Unfortunately, for many kids right now, and I know that I went through this period with my son, so many children just want to feel that sense of belonging and like they fit in. The last thing they want to do is stand out. So what advice would you give to parents out there who are trying to raise children who have critical thinking, who trust that inner guidance system, and are willing to kind of stand out in the crowd and be different?
What would I tell them if they're struggling with that, or what would I?
How can we nurture that in our children so that we raise a generation of critically thinking children instead of the kids that are just going to fall in line and comply? What can we do at home to make that happen?
Number one is what you said, model what you be what you're teaching and preaching, not do as I say, but do as I say and I do. So be congruent in your words and your actions, and acknowledge all of it. Like, what I tell my parents is to say to your kids, I know this is hard. I know this is uncomfortable. I know this is the road less traveled. And I know you'd like to be with your friends. And, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. Like, to really, be empathetic, and to examine, where are you with it? Where are you also projecting your stuff on your kids? It happens all the time, and your children don't need a heavy suitcase to carry emotionally that they can't carry. So depending on the age and the stage of the child, how you communicate with them is going to be very different. But first and foremost is to not deny or dismiss what they're experiencing, and not to turn it into something about you. Like, how can I support you? What would you like to do? What are you interested in? What I really get that this is hard for you. This is hard. This is a really hard. And I just am so proud of the way you are following what is right for you. Because when you see, how does it feel for you when you hear the other kids? One of the things I taught my daughter from the time she was really, like toddler, I would say to her when she met somebody or when she heard something, I would ask her to tune into her tummy. How does that feel? How did that feel when you heard, does that feel okay? Does that feel good? Not so good? What do you feel? So I was engendering within her own inner sense of what feels right. And so when you talk to tweens and teens, which is what you're, from age 12 on, everything is relational. The development of the brain is relational. So the opportunity to really support your kids in honoring themselves and really showing them that you're there for them. even because I truly believe, there's a lot in the parenting world that says when a kid turns a certain age, they leave their parents, they don't want to deal with them. And I really believe that when you have a connected relationship with your children, yes, they may do their things that all kids must do, we have to do, but they will always have that connection. That thread between you and your children is very strong.
Couldn't
So
agree more. I listen, I am blessed. Both my parents, I see them often. We get together, and it's because of how they raised me. It's something that it was instilled in me from a very early age that family is everything. So my relationship with my parents, my sister, my own family is number one. And I think that's something that we have to continue to pass along to our kids, give them the strength to stand
yeah,
out and to be different and to, continue to perpetuate this message of following that inner guidance system, because there cannot be any voice that's louder than our own. So I so appreciate all the work that you're doing, everything that you do to spread positivity and these compassionate conversations, because this is ultimately what's going to grow our movement. People are not attracted to chaos. They're not attracted to drama or ego or infighting. They
right.
are attracted to people who actively listen, who warmly welcome, and who are able to really have these compassionate conversations without judgment, without criticism, without resentment, and without an attachment to being right.
Yes.
We talk about
Yes.
feelings. Yes, we have to let go of being right. We don't have to be right. We just have to be heard. And we have to continue to plant those seeds gently with love and compassion. And Wendy, you are absolutely a stand for that. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You said everything, that letting go of being right and being willing to have those crunchy conversations, like really being willing to say, I'm responsible. I created that. I said that, and I want to clean this up, and to genuinely clean it up, not just do it because it sounds good. That's called spiritual bypass. It's really genuinely wanting to have harmony with somebody and really being responsible for the relationship. You said it, Stephanie. You said it.
We are kindred spirits. That's why you're here. And I'm definitely looking forward to having you come back on. There's so many wonderful lessons of the heart that we can bring. And I'm really committed not only to bringing the news, the information, and the updates, but to also continuing to bring in the enlightenment, the spirituality, the inspiration that's going to help to really grow our movement. Because at the end of the day, this is a spiritual battle. Like, we need to recognize that, and we need to understand that what we do with ourselves, how we are being the change that we wish to see in the world, that's going to be what really moves the needle in the direction of freedom and justice and just healthy, happy, free children. And that's what we want. So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Get in touch with you.
So they can email me, which is Wendy at Wendy Silvers, SILVERS.com. They can also go, I'm on Instagram at Wendy Silvers or at Million Mamas Movement. I'm on Twitter and Facebook. So I'm still on Facebook, actually.
So am I. I'm going to ride it until the bitter ends, until the wheels fall off and I get thrown off. It'll happen one of these days. But
exactly.
Just keep going until.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you back soon. Have a beautiful week.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.